Today on Censorship, I'm speaking with Goc O'Callaghan, experienced designer, festival founder, academic, consultant, and someone who has spent her life turning a childhood dream into reality. In this conversation, she takes us behind the scenes of Arctangent, one of the UK's most beloved independent festivals, and into the deeper world of experience design, community, and human connection. If these conversations spark something in you, don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, or share with someone it might inspire. It's the best way to support censorship and help amplify the stories that challenge how we define truth, purpose, and success. Hello, Goc. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you, Stephanie? Thank you.
To get us started, I would like to ask you to introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Goc O'Callaghan. I am the co-founder and director of an independent award-winning festival in the UK called Arctangent. I run a small strategic consultancy firm called UBQX, and I'm also an academic.
Okay, very good, thank you. A lot to go into. Let's start with the beginning. You've known for a very long time that you wanted to create long-lasting memories, experiences that leave long-lasting memories. Can you take us back to how that came to be? How did you realize that's what you wanted to do?
Sure. I had a catalytic dream at the age of 7 years old that I wanted to create memories for millions of people. But obviously, being so young, I wasn't entirely sure how I was going to do that. I grew up in a little wooden house in the middle of a forest, so I had the ideal environment in which to start throwing parties. So I did, and I have basically learnt to now make that my career.
Very nice. And how old were you, and what did you learn from that? How did you build from there?
So at 7, I wasn't sure what creating memories for millions of people even meant, even though I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I started throwing small parties that eventually grew into multi-day, small festival-style setups. And to be honest, I just made it up and learnt as I went. So I think you can learn a lot through being actively doing something, through experiential learning. And you learn from getting things wrong, and that was a perfect environment to play without the kind of corporate pressures that you have as an adult. And I slowly built up the skill set to deliver like a hedonistic party environment that grew into a very small little festival called Jockstock and has now evolved into Arctangent.
Very nice. Tell us a little bit about Arctangent. What's it like?
Arctangent currently caters for 12,000 people over 4 days. We have around 135 bands, an international lineup, and we book unorthodox artistry. So it's music that doesn't quite squarely fit within a genre, and it tends to have a heavier lean. This summer, we did Arctangent 11. We had to stop for 2 years due to COVID, as did most of the festival industry. And we started it with this idea that we wanted a heavier music festival in the southwest of England that catered for this slightly more obscure music. But what we hadn't forecast was that we were going to attract an international audience, international bands, and that we would still be able to run this event, 11 years later and over triple the capacity of the festival. And it's a weird and wonderful space between reality and fantasy on top of the Mendip Hills.
Is there an element of it, a little bit like the Burn festivals, of co-creation, or how do you bring the artists and schedule everything, or what kind of artists are we talking about?
So as an independent festival, we do everything in-house.
Okay.
From all of the pre-production to production, the design, the curation, but obviously we bring in suppliers to build stages and sound equipment. I don't do the booking, but the booking is very intentional to focus on this slightly obscure music because it's such a niche genre or a niche part of the music industry. There's a lot of recommendation, kind of word of mouth awareness around these bands, and it can be quite challenging to book the headliners because it's such a small pool of artists. But because of the niche booking that we have, it means Arctangent's got a reputation amongst people that like that type of music. So people quite often describe Arctangent as Christmas Day for guitar geeks. It's where they go once a year to really immerse themselves in this weird and wonderful music. And as a result of that, we have a wonderful community, especially with an international audience where sometimes the only common language is the music itself.
Very nice. That sounds fun.
It is a lot of fun.
Every year in the summer?
Yes, every August.
Where?
It's right on top of the Mendip Hills in Somerset in southwest England.
Very nice. That sounds fun.
It's hard work, but yes, it is a lot of fun.
I'm sure it is hard work. I'm sure. When do you start planning it? Is it really year on year?
It's probably around a 15, 16-month cycle.
Okay.
So for the first edition, we had our initial meeting in May 2011, and the first event took place in August 2013. So from then on, you're always preparing the tickets so that you can sell them the day that people leave the site, that the festival's just finished, booking artists in advance so you can release the lineup. So there's a lot of thinking that goes on before the current year's festival has taken place in preparation for the following summer.
So you started off planning parties in your backyard, basically, as a child.
Mm-hmm.
Walk us a little bit through the process of turning that into your profession. Because, I've heard when your hobby becomes your job, you lose the passion. Mm-hmm. Do you find that to be true, or how did it?
On occasions, yes. I think, the reality of when you do something for fun, you can disregard some of the bits that if you do it professionally, you have to be held accountable for. So, for example, the small festival Goc that started in my back garden, the first year I did that, I had absolutely no event production knowledge whatsoever, and yet I'm running festoons and generators and building stages and bringing in big sound systems. It wasn't licensed. Effectively, it was a free party, which I now know legally that was fine because it was an invite-only event. But as the Festival of Goc grew, I had to get the licence from the local council, which then meant sort of health and safety compliance, risk assessments. So it was very much experiential learning, learn by doing. And I look back on some of those earlier years and can see how naive I was in what I was doing. But I also think that's where a lot of the freedom and the fun came. That space to experiment in and to learn the ropes. And had I not gone through that process, I don't think Arctangent would be as successful as it's become.
So that freedom is reflected in the experience you create for the festival goers.
I think so. It's this passion to keep it DIY. Mm-hmm. And by DIY, that makes it sound unprofessional. It's absolutely not. It's a very professionally run outfit. But you can see the passion and the drive to create this environment where this weird and wonderful music is embraced by such a strange but beautiful community of people. So without that passion, Arctangent wouldn't be the festival that it is.
And how do you keep that passion alive when you do have to deal with all of the admin and the red tape?
I think being true to our core values, so acknowledging where we started, how we've progressed and where we want to go next. It's very much my opinion that it's our festival, not my festival. And by our festival, I don't mean just with my business partners and work colleagues, I mean with the audience as well.
Right.
So listening to what they have to say about what they want to see, where they've had good experiences or bad experiences, and what we can do to embrace their feedback and make it a space that everybody comes to, feels very safe, that it's a great community. And I think that really shows through Arctangent.
So it's a community building exercise as well, where the attendants, the audience, the artists themselves, I imagine, mm-hmm. and then you have a team.
Yes.
How do you go? What's the process you go through to design the experience from one year to the next? How do you mentioned you get feedback from the audience? Are there other inputs that you take?
Often trial and error. The benefit you have with a festival is it's entirely temporary infrastructure. So we turn up to the farm. It's a sheep farm. There's 2,000 sheep there. We build the festival, and 3.5 weeks later, there's no sign of the festival again. So because of the temporary nature of the event, if something isn't right from one year, we can change it to the next year. We can increase the sizes of tents or reduce the sizes of tents, move things around the site to optimise people's experience, providing more bar space or additional merch space. So it's constantly adapting and evolving. And whilst we can learn from having designed, produced and delivered the event ourselves, we're only a very small team. We don't experience every single part of the festival when it's live, and everybody experiences part of the festival in a different way because they've got a different reason to be there. So it's only through that feedback loop and applying that to the redesign and deployment of the festival that we can make those improvements. And I think that's where that sense of ownership across everybody comes. We have lots of bands that call it home. You know, people, this is a very religious reference and it's not a religious festival at all, but they call it like a mecca, this type of music. It's a pilgrimage to get to Somerset. And for some people, they've flown in from New Zealand or Mexico. They're travelling extreme distances to come to this sometimes quite muddy field to listen to quite angry music.
Do you have a lot of repeat comers?
Yes, both in terms of the audience and the bands. Obviously, we have to be mindful of our curation, that we can't put exactly the same lineup on year, but in line with sort of touring cycles and album releases, we do have a lot of repeat artists. One in particular, good friends of mine as well, a band called And So I Watch From Afar, who are from Belfast in Northern Ireland. They're almost like our house band. They've played so many times and they're part of the fabric of the festival, along with other bands like Maybe She Will and Rollo Tomasi. They've been, you know, on our lineup multiple times and they're always an audience favourite.
That's a good sign, to have repeat visitors, repeat artists. It's a good sign that you're doing it right.
I think so, especially when the artists themselves want to stay on site at the festival beyond their set. Because more often than not, you'll have a band fly in, play their show, and then they have to leave because they're touring. But we're seeing that some of these bands are choosing to stay because so many of their friends are also in bands that are playing, and it's a good opportunity to catch up and enjoy, you know, other music as well as their own that they're playing.
And we're back to that community building. They take advantage of the festival to see their friends, spend time with their audience, and that's great. I read somewhere you said there is a shift from materialism to experientialism. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Yes, so what I mean by that is that people are now seeking more meaningful experiences, so that there is more satisfaction sought by doing something than buying something. And I think this is a combination of COVID escalating our need, or heightening the fact that we need good contact with good people to have good times, but also people's awareness of their kind of their carbon footprint and the damage that we're causing to the earth by buying plastic or, you know, fast fashion that's going into landfill. So the shift from materialism to experientialism is choosing to spend our money on experiences where we perceive our time to be well spent, rather than on a physical product that's going to, you know, be put in a cupboard and not used for years until we throw it out and then it ends up in landfill.
So I want to talk a little bit about your advisory business. How do you bring that aspect into the work you do with companies, into your client work?
So I am trying to encourage companies to be experience-led in their approach to whatever it is they do. And my clients range from events and immersive experiences to real estate to structural engineering. It's very, very broad. But the commonality there is that wherever there are people, there are experiences. And I think that with this global shift towards experientialism, if we don't design for the end experience first, with a keen focus on our end users, those companies are going to fall by the wayside, because there are going to be other companies that come in and are designing with a human-centered focus, and they're going to be the companies that are excelling. So that's what I'm consulting in, is helping. There are a lot of companies that claim they offer a good experience, but when you challenge them on what that experience actually is, they normally default to talking about profitability. That's a very different thing. That's a return on investment of your creativity or your business model or your aspirations. I'm talking about return on experience. So what is the perceived value by your users of the experience that's been offered, and how does that create loyalty to your brand or your company or your organisation, and how does that in turn elevate your reputation as being an experience-led company? But you can only measure that success if you've first defined what that experience is, and the majority of companies aren't doing that.
Can we go through an example? Maybe you mentioned real estate. That to me, when I think experience, and that's also my background, I think events, but I feel that you're talking about more than just events as in moments in time. How do you make a real estate company or a retailer experience-led?
If we were to use the rental market as an example, so you're a potential tenant, you go to a number of different organisations that are supplying pre-kitted out rental units. the experience there is, how is that individual as a potential tenant greeted on their arrival? What is the process for getting them on board, helping them with paperwork? How are they made to feel when they arrive at their new property? What's the reporting process if there's an issue with the property or they need additional support? Perhaps they're an international new resident that might need some help with, some of the legalities around renting a property. How effective is the maintenance and feedback loops to get this person's issues addressed? And then how is that person feeling when they're living in that space? Do they have a sense of community? Do they have access to assets that enhance their lifestyle? And then when they leave, if they choose to move on to another property, what's the residual impact of the time that they've spent living in that space, and what do they carry forward with them? So again, it sounds very different to an event or experience, but it's all about the processes to optimise the experience that somebody has. And without that being thought out, regardless of whether it's renting a property or going shopping or going to a festival, it is all about the impact that it has on that particular individual because of well thought through experience design.
So really end-to-end journey or experience by the consumer, the customer, the user.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, exactly.
So you plan parties, you plan festivals, and now you advise companies on how to plan their end-to-end experience. How did you build the skills? How did you expand into that field?
It's a good question. I think because of that catalytic dream I had at 7 years old, I've always done a lot of reading around understanding what memories are, the process of storytelling, which I think is integral to people processing and understanding their own experiences, but also looking at all of the complementary but peripheral aspects that contribute to what I'd consider good practice experience design. So whether it's understanding site planning for a festival, but that could be master planning for an entire entertainment district out in the Middle East, for example. If you don't put the right things in the right place, that person's experience is diluted. So arguably that's architecture. Understanding sensory design. We have 42 senses, not 5, but we should be designing for 8 of them.
42? I had no idea. What are the 42 senses?
It would take me a long time to list them all, but basically it's the various combinations of the 8 core senses that we have.
Okay.
So the five we know, then interoception, mechanoreception and thermoreception. So they're different ways that the body are using senses to understand internal feelings or physicality within certain spaces. I'm fascinated with neuroscience now. So understanding what triggers people to make certain decisions, how does that create behavioural shifts? How does that make somebody feel safe or unsafe in certain environments? So the knowledge I've gathered is not just looking at events or experiences, it's pulling all these things together that create a better understanding of human needs and therefore how we can best design for them. And then from there, it's about establishing experience design best practice principles, which is what I'm teaching through masterclasses, what I write about in thought leadership, trend forecasts, or talking on podcasts, public speaking, but also to apply to projects. So rather than teach the experience design best practice principles there, I'm applying them to certain scenarios to advise companies on how to deliver that best end experience.
So you do both the academic theory training and the actual consulting to put things in practice.
So I'm currently studying a doctorate, which, all being well, I will graduate from in June next year.
Okay.
So by having the triad of a practitioner, consultant and an academic, I'm constantly checking myself from a different side to make sure that the information and the data that I'm sharing has some validity. I'm not just making it up. It is, at least if it's the practitioner lens, I've lived that experience. So therefore my consultancy is more robust because I can say I've done it. Or if it's consultancy and it's data-based, I've got an academic framework that has checked that is not being biased in its lean as far as any information can not be biased. So I'm constantly checking what I'm doing from different angles to make sure that it's robust. So hopefully the consultancy, practitioner, academic lens means that what I have to say is at least valid if people want to listen to it.
So even as you're going through that academic process of really theorizing everything that you do, you still keep both feet on the ground and you get your hands dirty.
Yeah, that's the fun bit.
Yes. Tell us a little more about your thesis. What are you writing about in your doctorate degree?
So the foundations of it is based on this catalytic dream of creating memories for millions of people. So I'm looking at the contributing factors to how that can happen and where my responsibility for that begins and ends and where I hand that over to somebody else. So what I'm grappling with at the moment is I'm looking at gathering knowledge, neuroscience and meaningfulness, which sounds quite disconnected if you talk about those four subject matters, but it's about understanding how we create this best experience and how through my interpretation and translation of what I understand from all of these peripheral but contributing areas of, or different disciplines when brought together for experience design can enable me to give experience designers a toolkit they need to create better experiences for their end users. So I know that for me to personally create memories for millions of people now, that was a naive dream at 7 because it couldn't be me personally that's responsible for that. But if I can disseminate the information that I have in ways that other experienced designers elevate the experiences that they're offering their end users, I can do it vicariously through them.
By passing on the knowledge, the wisdom.
And I think that's it. It's passing on the knowledge in a way that I have interpreted it, but empowering the people that absorb that information to then change it to work for them, to therefore then optimize that end user experience.
So you even as you teach, you integrate that freedom.
I'd like to think so.
Yeah.
I mean, the experience economy is one of the fastest emerging industries, so it's changing on a daily basis. So I think where my core strength lies in is trend forecasting, thinking about the future and tapping into information from these peripheral disciplines that contribute to the experience economy, and then letting the experience designers take what they need and disregard what they don't need from that information and apply it to whatever it is that they're designing.
Do you have a trend or two that you're seeing emerge now that we should be on the lookout for?
Ultra accessibility, I think, and by that I mean as a global population we're aging. Medical science is keeping us alive longer than historically we would have done. Therefore, designing for our own future when our needs change is going to be imperative. So what my needs are now will be different from my needs in 20 years' time, in 40 years' time. So designing for an ageing population and making everything as accessible as possible for everybody, I think is paramount. And I think we're starting to see that shift. The other thing that I'm forecasting, which is a more negative side that I'm desperately trying to change where I can, is the dilution of literacy around experience design. So, for example, too many companies are putting 5 people in a room and calling it a festival. And if you sit under a blue light and there's a smell of vanilla, suddenly that's an immersive experience. All that is doing is diluting terms that have very strong meaning, or did have very strong meaning. So I want to encourage people to use the correct terminology in their event marketing, and to ensure that they're using the terms in a way that is also not diluting what it is that they're offering, because I don't think it reflects very well. The other trend is that I would argue, we're deeply in imagination poverty. People aren't being very freeing with their thinking. So we're experiencing a lot of copycat ideas coming up again and again and again that have a slightly different branding over the top of them, because people are designing for a probable future, not a desirable future. So we need to open up people's imaginations first, design event concepts that don't have any restrictions in them, and then juggle that creativity viability to then bring that really elite idea into a deliverable realm, but without it being a copycat of something else.
The thing that comes to my mind when you mentioned that last point is AI, the use of AI, the overuse perhaps of AI.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see that, as I see it, as perhaps impoverishing imagination because it feeds itself on a constant loop? Or can it be used to enhance?
I think if it's used the wrong way, it can dilute. But I think if we embrace AI in the same way as we would an intern, you would get the AI to generate the work. So AI creates, humans curate. So you can use AI as a tool, and you can use it to help generate ideas, content, whatever. But if you were to get an intern to generate some work and it was going to represent your company, you wouldn't put that out the door without somebody checking it first. I think we need to do that with AI. It's inevitable that it's going to be in our lives for the foreseeable future, if not forever. And therefore, learning to use AI as a friendly tool rather than against us is paramount. But you can't ever work in the human nature of empathy and understanding into AI. And ultimately, to deliver a good end experience, that needs to be factored in. You need to understand the psychographic profile of the end users. You need to understand what their needs, goals and motivations are. And whilst AI can spit out a long list of what they might be, it's only with that empathetic understanding and that lived experience of seeing that end user and the impact it has that we can elevate the experiences that we're offering.
So you learn to work with AI.
Mm-hmm.
I always say learn to work with it or you'll end up working for it, because it is inevitable, isn't it?
Exactly.
I like this image of using it as an intern. You do edit and you do curate.
Yeah.
Whatever it comes up with.
And it's absolutely valid to use that as a tool in the same way as you'd use an intern. Interns can bring some incredible work.
Right.
At the festival, we have interns that are now in full paid positions, and that's been part of the elevation of the festival and the growth of the festival. So if we embrace AI along those terms, this will help us move into this designing for a desirable future, not a probable future as well.
Very cool. Tell me about what happened. Planning experiences is about anticipating human behavior, and we're not going to get it right every time. When something doesn't go to plan, do you have an example or a way to make that part of the experience and make that part of the memory, turn it into a positive?
If we consider that if we're talking about the production of an event, that there are no impossibilities, just unfound solutions. It's about being reactive and being creative. And again, listening to what your audience have to say. For example, at Art Tangent, for the first 7 years of Art Tangent, we had apocalyptic rain every day, every single festival, to the point where the artists playing on the main stage were getting rained on because of the wind blowing the rain into their face. So we stopped during COVID for 2 years, moved the festival to a different part of the site, decided that we were going to put the main stage in a big top structure to prevent people getting rained on. We had 40-degree heat. You couldn't script it. And actually some of our audience were then saying, bring back the rain, bring back the mist, because the atmosphere of the, mardy weather matched the music better. And you just have to embrace those things. You have to be reactive. We've had situations where bands have been delayed on their flights in, and our stage manager has spent 12 hours rigging all of their lights overnight ready for their set for them to only play on another stage. And you can get frustrated by that, or you can just embrace that that's what's happened, and therefore the motivation is communicating this to the audience that this band are now going to be on a different stage. You do what you can to, rally the forces and move as much of that lighting to the new space. And it's in that moment of uncertainty and the high adrenaline that kicks off that I love events. So when things are going well, great, it means we've done our jobs really well. But actually, for me, the buzz and the excitement is those slightly stressful moments where you don't know what the outcome is.
What does it take for an experience to have a long-lasting impact on an individual? Does it have to change them? Does it have to transform something in their perception? What does it take?
So this is something I've been deep diving into quite a lot recently through my academic studies, and something that I've grappled with for a long time as an experienced designer myself. I can't personally be responsible for a particular individual's memory, feeling, transformation. But what I can do is design the best environmental factors to facilitate an individual to have a transformational experience. And by a transformational experience, I mean something that instigates a change inside of them that may not be instantaneous. It might take a day, a week, a couple of years even for it to kind of come to the surface and for that individual to understand it. But it's not my personal responsibility to make that happen for somebody. But if I create the right environmental factors for them to immerse themselves in a participation realm that works for them in a way that they feel psychologically safe, that they can fully engage with everything that they want to and feel part of a community, get lost in the music, whatever the design is, that's when the opportunity for transformation will take place. And they will have a perceived value of time well spent, which is then over and above perhaps the cost of ticket entry. So it's a residual legacy that they carry with them.
What kind of legacy are you trying to build? What do you want people to remember 5, 10, 20 years from now?
I can't pinpoint that to a specific thing, but what I want them to have is a feeling of warmth inside them when they recall a memory from an experience that they have, and that they've got a bank of really good stories that they want to draw upon and tell time and time again, whether it's to encourage other people to go and have a similar experience or because they're having that conversation with peers that were at that event or experience at the same time. So it's the memory creation and storytelling, which to me is the biggest legacy that good experience design can make happen.
What advice would you give someone who wants to build meaningful experiences? Someone maybe early in their career. What's one principle they should always keep in mind?
Define the experience first and make sure that that's very, very clear and understood by yourself and whoever it is that you're working with. From there, understand your end users. So who is it that are going to be taking part in that experience, whether it's your audience, whether it's your workers, whether it's suppliers. Make sure that experience is understood by your end users and then design backwards.
Okay, thank you. I'll remember that. If you could talk to that 7-year-old yourself, or that had the dream, or the 10-year-old that was planning parties in her back garden, what would you tell her?
Just follow your dream. I think maybe my stubbornness to fulfill this dream has been the thing that's got me here, but also I can't imagine doing something else. So I think if the 7-year-old me could see what I'm doing now, I don't think she would believe it. But I think the most important thing is for anybody else who has a real desire to fulfill a dream in whatever capacity that is, trust in that tacit knowledge, that feeling inside you. It won't be easy, but just keep going, because there's no greater reward than fulfilling it.
Do you think you will ever feel that it's fulfilled? Like, is this or is it a lifelong quest?
I mean, you get moments of fulfillment, I think, through, my favourite part of the festival is the stories that I hear afterwards. I have a great time at the festival, don't get me wrong, but for me, hearing the granular detail of the stories that people tell. So in that moment, there is that fulfillment, there is that success. I can never count how many people have had a memory created as a direct result of something that I've worked on. So therefore, I think I'll never stop being in pursuit of that. And that's kind of fun. And especially in an industry such as the experience economy, which is progressing so quickly, it's ever changing. So therefore my knowledge is forever going to be challenged, and my understanding of it is forever going to be challenged. And it's almost a case, the more you know, the less you know. But it just creates opportunity to learn more and understand people more. And I think that's where this interwoven thread of meaningfulness, neuroscience, behavioural science, experience design is a really interesting space, especially because our audiences are getting smarter. They know what they want to achieve out of the time that they're spending and the money that they're spending. So staying ahead of the curve is the way to be successful.
Do you organize in any way this feedback? Well, you mentioned the feedback loop earlier to get constructive ideas. Do you also have those stories, in French we say livre d'or, where people share their memories, their favorite part? Is that part of your feedback collection, or do you have something separate?
I have started to collate some stories that are associated with the festival. I'm going to sound slightly contradictory here. When we recall a memory, it was originally thought that a memory was an intangible thing. It was like an energy or something within inside us that we would never be able to physically represent. But it's more recently been found out that memory is actually a protein string. So every time we tell a story about a certain memory, that protein string gets longer. And as humans, it's our inherent nature to embellish the stories that we tell. It's an evolutionary tool that's helped us survive and get to where we are. But we haven't learned to stop embellishing stories, even though we don't need to be running away from a lion or a tiger or a bear or whatever. So every time we recall a memory, the protein string is getting longer, which means that our only true memories are the ones that we never tell, because it's being distorted. But that in itself, to me, is immensely interesting. But to contradict that, there is also something called memory recall bias, which is we don't remember things exactly as they are in the moment. So you could be on a roller coaster, absolutely terrified, being, spun around in circles and upside down, and in that moment you're terrified. But you step off the roller coaster and you go, that was great. Actually, no, that's not the truth, is it? You were terrified in that moment. The residual impact of that was that you can rationalise that it was fun, now you're safe. So our memories aren't true to the actual experiences that we have. But this is where I think the neuroscience element is interesting. So I worked with a company called Six Immersion during Art Tangent this summer, and we measured in real time people's immersion or frustration with the experiences that they were having on site. So it uses IoT, so information of things, so smartwatches, for example, to measure heart rate. And your heart rate changes depending on whether you're immersed or frustrated with an experience. So if you're immersed, your body produces more oxytocin, and that changes how your heart beats. And if you're frustrated, it produces more cortisol, so that also measures how your heart beats. So having this real-time aggregated data about the audience response to a certain band or a certain experience on site, to me, it's a real-time pulse as to what's happening.
Literally
A real-time pulse. And, it's interesting. What I want to start to look into is the correlation between the actual real-time immersion value and the memory recall and how that distorts further down the line.
That's fascinating.
It's so nerdy, but I love it.
It is a little bit nerdy, but I'm geeking out. I'm happy. Where do you find your inspiration? Are there books or podcasts or documentaries, or is it traveling? How do you find your own inspiration to go dig deeper always?
I'm definitely a hippie with a purpose. I love traveling the world, and I seek great enjoyment from spending time with nomadic people, especially being in very remote parts of the world, connecting with the earth. I'm definitely quite a spiritual hippie person in that respect. But then I read a number of books in different fields. I listen to a whole bunch of podcasts, predominantly about people that are trying to figure complicated things out for themselves in their line of work. And more often than not, that triggers a new thought process for me, or it opens up a new line of research for me. And then it's about this kind of translator role again. What of that new knowledge for me can be brought into the experience economy and repurposed in a way that it's going to help other people with experience design.
Is there a recent read you'd like to recommend?
Recent read I'd like to recommend? The Mind Extended. And it's about, I forget the author's name, it's about how our brain is only one part of our knowing. So we can use our brain, we think we know how we use our brain, but our brain and our peripheral selves tell us so much more than we already know. So it's kind of neuroscience-y, kind of behavioural science-y. And I listened to a podcast on it as well that was really interesting.
The same name, the podcast?
The author of the podcast, the author of the book was on this podcast.
Okay.
So it was through the Future of Storytelling is the podcast.
Very nice. Thank you. I'll put the links under
Thank you. I can send them to you.
Yes, please. Where can people find you, follow you, contact you?
GocO'Callaghan.co.uk. I'm on LinkedIn as Goc O'Callaghan, but also the festival is under Arctangent, and my experience consultancy is ubqx.world as a URL for the website.
All right, same thing. I'll put all the links under
Thank
the
you.
description
I'll
of
send
the
you the list
episode.
of them
Yes.
as well.
Thank you. Last question, Goc. What can we wish for you at this point of your journey?
That's a very good question. In the immediate future, a very nice glass of French red wine, given that we're in Paris as we record this. But in the future, just that for anybody who has a real passion about creating experiences with a real genuine authenticity for wanting that end user to have a good time, that they reach out and that I can help them talk through and understand the experience economy, which is, you know, very, very complicated in its own right, but that that I can help others to help me fulfill my dream.
That sounds great. Thank you so much for coming to Paris.
Thank you.
I had a great time.
Me too. Thank you so much.